and I'm Vice Chair, currently acting as Chair for the Nottingham Green Party branch. And we're really honoured and we're really lucky tonight to have John Hess, who's quite well known and worked for the BBC as
political editor for East Midlands,
for many years, and has for the last 6 years has still been active with the BBC and also working with Robin Hood Media, who do programmes for the BBC. So you were for a while editor of the Politics.
Yeah, I basically was a political correspondent for the BBC, working between, almost like being a constituency MP, working between Westminster, reporting on what regional MPs were doing, saying, that sort of thing, as well as being based back in the patch as well.
Yes.
And that included covering aspects of, in those days, the European Parliament as well as Westminster, and the regional agenda, when there was a regional agenda, and local politics as well. And yeah, I did that for quite a few years. Left the BBC 6 years ago.
Yes.
And then what with the referendum and the election campaigns, the BBC asked me back to help out. And I kind of do some guest booking for BBC One's Politics East Midlands, which is a Sunday morning show, which has just returned to the studio. So a little bit like this evening. We've been doing the programme online for the last 18 months. It just was transformative having political guests back in the studio again.
Yes, I bet it was, yes. And you're also an honorary professor at University of Nottingham.
Yes, I was invited to be an honorary professor at the School of Politics, which is a great honour. What does it involve? It means I get access to the library, which is useful. And I also run a series of weekly, in fact, we're just about to start it again, weekly talks for the second year students who are studying British contemporary politics. And that series is about to start in a few weeks' time. And yeah, that's interesting. We get some relative big hitters. Tom Watson's kicking it off. We've also got Mark Spencer, Chief Whip, as well as being a local MP. So there's a mix of senior MPs, but it's pegged to the curriculum, which is very much about the impact of the elections, the last 2 elections, and Brexit, which is the main thrust of the academic course that these particular students are doing.
So you very much got your finger on the pulse.
Not awfully sure about that these days, whatever the pulse is. I did watch bit of the Tory conference this morning, and I think what struck me, and it must have struck other people, is, I know the conference centre at Manchester very well, the old GMEX centre, which is huge. All the political parties can pack in a lot of people there, and all the media and the exhibition stands that go with the big political party. But the hall seems to have shrunk deliberately. Now, I don't know whether when the Tories were planning their annual conference for the first time in public, as it were, rather than doing it online, they thought we won't get many people coming to Manchester, it'll all be online. I don't think they've kind of quite coped with the fact that many Tory activists would want to go to Manchester for the event.
Yeah.
And so there's no, from what I could see, there's no social distancing or anything like
right.
that at all. It looked like a real health hazard from what I could see. They're there.
But also, just to give us your oversight, if you like, of the way the media has changed, because over the last 10 years, I get the impression the media has changed hugely. And the way people, especially young people, access their news is a change beyond recognition almost. So If you could talk a bit about that.
Let's start about that, the changing environment of news. You're absolutely right, Cap. It has been transformed. So in my case, when I first started in television, there were 3 TV channels.
Yes.
There was BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV. Within a week of me starting, it was on Midlands Today at Pebble Mill. Murdoch had launched the satellites. Breakfast television had been launched. Channel 5, Channel 4 went on the air within a couple of years. And so you had this massive explosion of what I call linear television. And then we had that move to digital television, which offered even greater choice. So in effect, from a television point of view, we had for the first time the equivalent of walking into WH Smith's and seeing the range of specialist magazines. You had the equivalent of that on television, just at the flick of a button. Now I remember a previous Director General of the BBC who said that seismic change in the ability of people to watch whatever they wanted to watch, and this was before Netflix and the streaming services, would mean it would be the end of the BBC as we knew it, and it would be the end of ITV1 as we knew it. And I always thought at the time that that was grossly exaggerated claim. It was by John Burt. Of course, what happened was the BBC and ITV saw the threat coming, so adapted and changed. And also, and this was, I think, the big takeaway message I had from his successor, which is Greg Dyke, was it didn't matter how crowded the television marketplace became, people would always come back to what they know. And he argued that people come back to BBC One, they'll come back to ITV1, because in terms of news and current affairs especially, they are known and they're trusted. But also programmes, EastEnders, Coronation Street, the architecture of how an evening's viewing is scheduled, the viewer knows, understands, and I wouldn't say appreciate all the time, but they know what they're going to get. Now, you could argue that during the pandemic, especially, the success of the streaming services like Netflix has knocked that on the head. I think it has to a certain extent. But, and it's a big but, I would say in terms of news, I would say that for news events, the news events by and large tend to gravitate to what they know.
Yeah.
And that tends to be BBC News, Channel 4 News, ITN, and I would add Sky to that mix as well. So those are the main news gathering kind of players. And although there'll be some new entrants like GB News and Murdoch's launching another satellite news channel targeted at the UK in January, I think it is. I'm not sure how much of a threat they're going to be. I mean, there'll be a market for the Murdoch channel because he's already signed up Piers Morgan. And GB News, for anyone who's watched it, will see familiar faces, established broadcast faces, but they are struggling to get an audience. So the main players will remain BBC One, ITV1, Channel 4, and Sky News. And then into the local news, and I think that's also where there's been a big change. Certainly with the print media, all the provincial newspapers have contracted. And that's because of a squeeze in advertising revenue, which in turn means that newspaper management have had to cut the most expensive part of their operation, which is the journalists. The news gathering capacity of any newsroom is your news gathering journalists. And newspapers have chopped that. They've chopped their subbing teams, so they now have hubs who are probably working on possibly up to 4 to 5 newspapers rather than on the one evening paper. And of course, evening papers, they don't exist anymore. because the very nature of providing online news and trying to make the online and the website a vehicle for generating cash means that there aren't any deadlines anymore. The deadline is as soon as you can turn around the story and you put it online. There will be some revenue from over-the-counter sales, but they are extremely marginal. I think I bought my first over-the-counter copy of the Nottingham Post last week. It was last Monday. It was the special pull-out for the Robin Hood Marathon. I wanted to see, because they did the big pull-out with all the official results and the photographs. I mean, I could have seen that online, but you need the big spread to kind of put it in context where your mates have come, what their times are. So I think newspapers have struggled, and I think will continue to struggle until, and this is us, until we're prepared to pay for content online. There are very few paywalls in newspapers. Financial Times was the first. Times has got a paywall. The Telegraph series got a paywall. I think the Sun, doesn't the Sun have a paywall?
We've never tried.
The Sun, I think, probably does have a paywall, but it's still just about the biggest selling over-the-counter newspaper in this country. The Mail is free online and is still the most read website in Europe. So that's quite a remarkable achievement by them with their mix. I mean, you may loathe it, but they found a formula and it seems to work for the audience that would be attracted to the Daily Mail diet of stories and journalism and gossip and fashion and television and all the rest of it. So that's the changing environment. I mean, there's local television, which the Tories launched, which was kind of Cameron's big idea 10 years ago, and it's been a flop, with few exceptions. I mean, one of the exceptions is here. Notts TV is still going, and the reason it's going is it has basically become a training arm of Nottingham Trent University, and a very successful one. But you go elsewhere, and local television it's struggling. I think Mustard Television is still going in Norwich. You would have thought cities where that localness would work, it just never got off the ground. It didn't have the funding. Birmingham's a good example. There was never the funding for it. They got a team together, presentation team together, but they couldn't get enough money to get it off the ground. And the audiences weren't there because local audiences, even in a city like this, tend to gravitate to what they know, and that tends to be East Midlands Today or Central News. And it would take a lot to wean them away from that to watch Notts TV, unless it's a specialist programme. I mean, I can't recall the last time I dipped into Notts TV. I think it was to watch a replay of Splendour from 4 years ago. And I've been a guest on it a couple of times, but I can't say I'm a regular viewer at all. Perhaps I should be, but I'm not. Where do you get your news from? Because that's always the key, it strikes me. Where do you get my news? Yes, where do you get your news from? Radio 4. Okay.
Nothing else.
Today programme. Okay.
Well,
You are.
I listen to Radio 4 all day, all the time.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm really delighted to hear that.
I don't watch any television news. I hate it. I don't know what anybody looks like. When they show pictures on sort of quiz programs, I think I don't know who that is. But because I only hear their voices.
Well, I have to say, I'm with you. Not in terms of television. I watch too much television. But yeah, I'm Radio 4. I've been brought up on Radio 4, the Today programme. But we are the exception, not the rule. We are very unusual from that point of view, in that we wake up to listen to Nick Robertson or whoever telling us the news. People get their news, and it's not even a generational thing. It's a bit of a cliche to say it's a generational thing. It's young people, but people are getting their news from Facebook and from Twitter, but also from their mates. We still talk to each other. Have you seen? Have you heard? So there's still that kind of parish pump element to passing on information and news. Don't underestimate the importance of that. I will do that a little bit later to illustrate something. So, did you see? You didn't see it on iPlayer. It's staggering. It's a car crash at television political interviews.
But it's not very objective, is it? I mean, that people are just going for what happens to interest them. That whereas, you know, with the BBC or some of the more reputable newspapers, that there is verification of the accuracy of the news.
Well, there's that. There's that. I mean, with Twitter, you are getting information and news from people, organisation that you like, by and large, or you're interested in. My social media accounts reflect my initial BBC training. And I said that purely because when social media was starting out, the BBC was desperate not to be left behind and was very keen for correspondents and political journalists like myself to have a presence online, to have a Facebook presence, Instagram presence, and a presence on Twitter. So if we had a story, break it on Twitter, get it out there as soon as possible, which is fine. And I've kind of got used to that. So my Twitter feed is pretty broad. There's all the political rainbow on my Twitter feed, but it's probably not the case with most people because they tend to follow who they like. So you do get that kind of narrow band view of information. Is that a problem? Well, it could be a problem if the bulk of the information is coming from organisations that have a vested interest in pursuing a particular line, whether they're wanting to sell you something, basic marketing of some kind or another, or it's propaganda, and you're not getting the full picture. And I think the thing is, you just need to be aware of that. And I think most people are smart enough to be aware that you're only getting one side of the picture. Not everybody wants to get a broad, wide range of information. They're quite happy being in their comfort zone. And I suppose from the mainstream broadcaster's point of view, it's trying to say, actually, there are two sides to every story. And that's an important part of what the newspapers and the broadcasters do, I think. So we've covered quite a bit of where we are today, do you think, in terms of the media? Will it change? No, I don't think so. BBC is going through its usual existential crisis, its spasms, and it seems to happen more frequently these days. A lot of it usually comes off the back of a big bust-up with whoever's in government at the time. This current one is more to do with the long-term effect of austerity cuts by Cameron and his Chancellor. And a lot of those efficiency savings cuts are still working their way through BBC budgets, which is why you've probably been aware of kind of very experienced journalists, presenters saying farewell to the BBC. It's because they're expensive, and BBC have decided they've got to do a cull of senior staff, both in terms of what you see on the screen, what you hear on the radio, but also behind the screen as well. Inevitably, new technology has meant that a television news gathering operation, which is expensive and involves a lot of staff to get from the breaking of the story to what you see on the television screen. Technology has kind of done to television what new technology did to the print industry, and that a whole swathe of people are no longer required because the technology means that they're no longer required. My criticism is that the BBC are also chopping the journalists who are part of the news gathering and occasionally exposing stories that vested interests would rather not have exposed. And I think the day the BBC is unable to do that, then the BBC is not worth supporting anymore. So I was really delighted to hear Richard Bilton, both yesterday and today, has been on the output non-stop, talking about the latest investigation by a number of news organisations around the world, looking into political donations, for example. You know, in the case of today, why the Tories have received donations, you know, in one case it's £2 million from a Russian oligarch. You know,
Well,
and
it's
it wasn't even in his name.
Yeah.
It was in his wife's name, who is a British citizen, and it's all above board.
Yeah.
But that's where the questions from central office stopped.
Yeah.
Because you know, if you've got an election to fight, £2 million quid's very nice to have in the back pocket, isn't it? So yes, the importance of all news gathering organisations to have that capacity, not just to report the news, but to investigate, I think is fundamental, because investigative journalism requires money, it requires time, it requires saying to people, we'll take you off the rota, we'll get you to work on this. And in the case of investigating wrongdoing, the type of which has been exposed in The Guardian and the BBC and the news organisations around the world, they would have had people working on that for 2 years. So if you come to a cash-strapped editor and says, can you take me off the road for 2 years so I can investigate dodgy dealings? He's going to say, well, can you produce some copy tomorrow? And he's going to say, no, of course not, I've got to investigate it. Got to be checked with the lawyers. But I'm afraid news organisations that are worth their salt really stand or fall by their ability to occasionally, you know, kick a stone over and just have a look to see what's under that stone. And if it's not particularly pleasant, or it's not in the public interest, or at worst it's criminal, then that needs to be revealed, I think, and exposed. I mean, there are some great examples. I mean, the one historic one is the Sunday Times Insight team, how they exposed and sixed as the whole thalidomide scandal, which was an outrage. And that was big business, transatlantic American pharmaceutical companies who thought they'd come up with some drug that would help pregnant women. And of course, what they did, it produced deformed thalidomide kids, and we're still living with that today. That's a good crowning example of campaigning journalism that changes the law, changes the mindset, changes the culture of the country. But there have been others. I mean, there was the whole MP's expenses row that was exposed by the Telegraph. I mean, some MPs, I thought, you know, were kind of tarred unfairly by that. But the vast majority deserved what they got. The duck pond. Who can we forget the duck? Whose was
the duck house?
The duck house. Was that?
You already had a pond.
Yes, you already had a pond. There was the moat, wasn't there? Yeah, there was the moat, wasn't there? Yeah. Yeah. And all the, it was just the whole sleaze element of it. You know, there was one local MP who used parliamentary expenses to pay for the gates to his constituency home. And when I say gates, we're talking massive gates. I mean, they're the type of gates that you would see in the opening shot of Citizen Kane. They're basically saying, keep out. I don't care what constituents you are, don't come in here. And you know, that really is corrupting. It might not be corrupt, but it's corrupting. And there are examples of that. And I would argue even at the local level. I'll give you one illustration a little bit later.
I just wanted to ask you one more question about the BBC, because many of us on the left really fear for the BBC at the hands of the current Tory party. Many people think that the current Tory party has a mission to cut the legs off the BBC, if you like, and are very hostile to it. Its very existence, but certainly its current dominant role.
Yeah.
And would like your comment on that.
Can I just? I mean, tonight on PM.
Yeah.
Sorry, got my news.
Yeah.
So not just the Today programme, but Inside Science, all sorts of. I mean, you know, I kept saying to people all through the pandemic, listen to Inside Science, listen to more or less. If you want the facts on this,
it's a brilliant
listen to these programmes. Anyway,
so what we feel,
what Jane Doris on this programme.
What many people feel. Sorry, Karen.
She was saying apparently that the BBC don't have enough working class people working for them, which is a bit ironic coming from, you know, she is from, you know, perhaps she thinks that what she does with her activities on I'm a Celebrity is what people should be doing with their time, you know, not doing proper journalism. But, you know, I don't know, I was very worried when I heard that. I thought, you know, having her as culture.
Yeah.
And Channel 4 as well.
She doesn't run the BBC.
No, I know.
But she doesn't run Channel 4, but as new culture secretary, she's obviously very influential. The bottom line is that the BBC and Channel 4 are public service organisations. They stay in business because they have to renew their charter to stay in business. And that seems to come around ever so often. It's going to come around for the BBC, the latest 5-year review comes around, gosh, that's soon, I think it's next year. Now, the previous team, with John Whittingdale in particular, he was always very critical of the BBC, but he had a depth of knowledge about broadcasting and the BBC and ITV over many, many years. And it's a shame that he's gone. Nadine Dorries, I'm not quite sure what difference she'll make. She'll make a lot of noise. And some civil servant will say, Secretary of State, we've heard this argument against the BBC before about it not being representative enough and not having enough working class voices on it. But you may have spotted they moved lock, stock and barrel to Salford some years ago. Just watch the output, just listen to the continuity. You know, it has changed, the feel and the voice of it, and the look of it, which is good. I'm not going to criticise that. I think, yeah, about time, quite obviously. The one issue that I think where the BBC are going to have problems actually aren't to do with the new Secretary of State. They're going to come from Scotland, and I think if the referendum happens and there's a majority to leave, one of the organisations that will change overnight is BBC Scotland, because it'll no longer be BBC Scotland. There's just no way an independent Scotland, I think, would tolerate its main state broadcaster being run from London. What's happened, and this is a process that's accelerated, is the BBC have tried to ship more and more programming to Norfolk border. They now do, they've now got their own Scotland channel, BBC Alba. They do their own hour kind of news at 9 o'clock, which is a mix of Scottish national and UK national and international news. And it's quite watchable. It's a good mix. You know, it's the best of kind of regional television with an international global view. And because they've got an hour, they're able to mix it. It's the nearest, I think, the BBC has in terms of offering a Channel 4 news at 7 o'clock feel. I mean, I watch virtually everything that moves still, but I have to say my go-to is Kay Burley in the morning on Sky. I think she wins hands down over BBC Breakfast and ITV. And then in the evening, Channel 4 News at 7 just offers you something that you don't see on news at 10, especially on BBC News at 6 and 10. It's not just the presentation of the style, but it is the choice of stories. And the way they're handled, I just think they're more interesting. BBC is straight down the middle. You know, bang, this has happened, that's happened. Oh, let's get some context. Here's Laura Koonsberg. News at 10, I do enjoy watching, because although the story count is very similar to the BBC News at 10, that style of delivery by Tom Bradbury, I just think is brilliant. I mean, it's just a very easy style, without commenting on the news about what he thinks. He says, you noticed, suddenly we're back into long queues again. He's saying what we're all thinking. You know, long queues at the pumps, long queues at the supermarkets, long queues at the hospitals, long queues at the GP surgery. It's just a style of scripting that you don't get from the BBC 10 o'clock news, because it's more straight. It's more down the middle.
You wouldn't say it was true that because of fear of what the government might do to the BBC financially, that the BBC news reporting is pulled in its horns?
No, I wouldn't say it's fear. I would say, I touched on it a while ago, where it's pulled in its horns is financially, because the government have not only put a cap on the license fee in terms of increases, because broadcast inflation is always higher than general price inflation. But the government have just shoved other things in the direction of the BBC. So, for example, the whole issue of senior citizens' free TV licenses, which the government always used to pay for. The Tories said, oh, the BBC will have to pick up the tab for that. Ditto the World Service, which the government always used to pay for, never knew why, but it was a branch of the Foreign Office. It was funded out of the Foreign Office budget. The Cameron government said, from now, BBC will pay for that. So there was a double whammy. They were suddenly having to find the money to pay for the World Service, which, when you ask people, it's after the Archers and Desert Island Discs and the Today programme, PM, it's probably the one thing people say, that's what the BBC is about. It's the World Service. Doesn't matter where you go around the world, you'll be able to hear, you know, this is London. Well, the Foreign Office used to pay for that, they don't anymore. And, you know, if you're over 75, the government used to pay for your free licence. Now it doesn't, the BBC, or licence fee payers, or us, basically, we're subsidising that, which means that's money not going into programmes.
Okay.
And if there's money not going into programmes, well, you can see you get loads of repeats. I mean, the pandemic hasn't helped, because there hasn't been as much filming on location. But how on earth BBC 4 manages to fill its schedule, I don't know. But they do, with lots of repeats.
I quite like BBC.
Well, I quite like BBC and BBC 2, but if there's a channel that's vulnerable now, it's BBC 4. That'll go, and all those type of programmes, quirky artistic programmes, will just be shunted onto BBC 2. The problem that channel controllers may have is live sport. BBC didn't used to have anything in terms of live sport, because it all went to Sky. But the BBC is kind of, you know, getting back into the game with a deal to have the 100, the new cricket format. That's a BBC One offer, together with Sky Sport as well. But you can watch live cricket on BBC One this summer for the first time in Lord knows how many years, and also football. It's women's football, but it's live. And that will be increasingly popular. So you've got two avenues where the BBC have decided we're going to invest in live sport in an area where they think there's going to be growth. And the BBC have been persuaded that there's going to be huge popularity in the 100 format of cricket and huge popularity in women's football. I think they'll be proved right in 5 to 10 years' time.
That's great. Thank you very much. I should give the people online an opportunity to ask questions, just in case anybody's got any. Would anybody like to ask John any questions?
They're all watching the telly.
Anyone on the Zoom call? Has anyone got a question? No, all the screens are frozen. Uh-oh.
All screens are frozen now. Oh no.
That's what they were moving up until a moment ago.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, go ahead, Rosemary.
Yes, I was wondering whether the dramas, particularly costume dramas, when they're sold abroad for other systems, don't they bring in any significant income for the BBC?
I'm not getting that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just the
I
drama,
put it in the chat as well.
Sorry, just the.
does the BBC get a significant income from sort of things like costume drama?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, if you look, so take Killing Eve, that's a good example. If you look at the end credits, you'll see a number of production companies that have been involved in producing that and financing it. And what it means, it often means that the deal could be that American audiences get sight of the programme first. So the BBC haven't got it exclusively, but they'll have it exclusively within the UK, but American audiences will see it first. Now that can be a problem if it's also available online. So it means that UK audiences won't wait until it's shown on BBC One or BBC Four or BBC Two. They'll just say, oh, I can find a site in the States and watch it straight away. But that's the reality of it, really, because producing that type of high-end drama is expensive. And you compare, I haven't got the comparison of figures, but if you compare for the BBC, the cost of doing, for example, Killing Eve, with the cost of doing The Crown on Netflix, it may well be that Netflix put more money into one episode of The Crown that paid for the whole of Killing Eve. And it's the same with, I mean, Game of Thrones was the one that kicked it all off. That was the moment when people thought, flipping heck, this is kind of Hollywood standard production values and budgets in a television program. And people kind of woke up to Netflix and thought, blimey, and so subscribed. And of course, what's happened during lockdown is more people have subscribed to Netflix, but there have been other entrants to the market. So you've got Amazon Prime, they're in there, Apple are in there. Who else, Adam? Who else? There's about
Disney,
5 of them now.
Disney Plus.
Disney Plus are in
That's
there.
very irritating because you can't watch Star Wars or anything unless you've got Disney Plus.
Oh, I demand my money back. It's an outrage. But I mean, the first entrants in any market are the ones that tend to capture the bulk of the available market. And then it's a case of the others who come along and it's coattails. They hope to get on the coattails and eke out a slice of the market. And I think that's what's happening with the streaming services that are now here. And some of them will fold, some of them will merge as the television audience starts to dwindle for streaming, because it's going to get more expensive.
Can I ask why the BBC don't allow iPlayer in other countries? My daughter was in Switzerland. She watches Bake Off. She has to watch it live.
Yeah.
The BBC in Switzerland has adverts.
It's
on
a right.
really
It's a right. Oh yeah, it's a
It's
rights issue.
But
It's purely
no
money.
iPlayer. I keep saying, oh,
Yeah.
have you seen this, Lizzie?
Yeah.
She's, what's it on? Oh, it's on iPlayer. Oh,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
she can't.
It's purely down to rights. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's purely down to rights. It's the same reason, for example, why if I'm listening to Radio Nottingham online on a Saturday afternoon, you won't be able to hear the output, because the output is a football commentary from the City Ground, and the BBC haven't got the rights to broadcast online because it's for a global audience. because it's because it's the internet, it's a global audience. There are people who will have the rights, who have already bought the rights to that. Somebody somewhere will have the rights to Bake Off, but it's certainly not the BBC outside of the UK. So somebody will be screening, and I suspect what it is with the format that's being sold. So
Well, Bake Off it's a Channel 4 now, but when it was.
yeah, when it was, but the format is produced by an independent TV company. They had it sold to the BBC. BBC decided they didn't want it any longer, and then they moved lock, stock, and barrel, didn't they, to Channel 4?
Yeah.
But it's the format. So Strictly Come Dancing, another illustration. That's a huge. I mean, that's been box office for the BBC, both domestically in the UK, but they've sold the format around the world.
But that does apply to Channel 4 as well. She can't watch all 4 either, but she can watch Channel 4 live.
Oh, right, okay. It will be just purely down to rights.
It just seems that it's an opportunity to make money in other countries from expats.
Yes.
That's lost.
Yeah.
So
You could watch it. You could watch it. I'm trying to think whether. So you can get Sky abroad, but it depends. Depends which satellite you've got. You've got to know your satellites when you're abroad, really. So no, I can't help on that one.
No, I was just wondering. I just thought it was a lost opportunity for all.
I mean, the BBC do have a deal with NBC in the States, so you can tune into BBC America, which offers BBC programs and repeats, and you can still watch Fawlty Towers and Monty Python because the Americans lap all that up, even after all these years, apparently. And BBC makes a stack of money out of that from that American market. But sorry, I can't help your daughter in terms of watching Strictly.